welcome to TD Aquatics. This is episode 2 of our aquascaping journey. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be working on this 30 centimeters cubic brought to you by Lush River. So let's get started. Okay, so first thing we do is to check the tank for any defects, especially in the frontal area, so that we can either rotate the tank to a different side or, get a refund if required. So it's important to check your tank thoroughly for any defects. For today's project, I've chosen dragonstone. As you can see, I like to lay them out so that I can easily access them, especially with different size. I like to know my asset before I start, so here it is. Now the next thing is to wear yourself a glove, any gloves, because handling this can hurt your fingers, and it's important to maybe put on a face mask as well, because it could get very dusty. So if I lose my voice during the recording, please excuse, because I may have my face mask on. Okay, so there's no right or wrong way of doing this, but I always like to start with a thin layer of substrate in the tank, so that it will hold most of my foundation, especially when I'm dealing with rocks a bit later on. So it's always good to have a thin layer of substrate or sand in there before we start. So as you can see here, I have chosen 3 pieces of rocks which will form the base and foundation of my scape, and that it will also dictate how my scape gonna look like and what vision I have based on these foundation rocks. So far we've got 3 pieces, 1, 2, 3. They're resting on the substrate that you can see earlier. I'm not too keen about, or I'm not too worried about it falling off at the moment. I'm just building my visual and my foundation. So let's leave it as is. So they're just resting on top of each other and on the substrate. But so far you can really see my vision. So this is the alleyway, and you got a little path coming up here, and this will build the mountain top later on. So yes, so far so good. Look like we ran into our first problem. What happened is there's a gap between this rock and the glass, but I quickly resolved it by finding a smaller piece and put it in within the gap. Not to worry about the remaining gap at the moment, because we're gonna deal with that later, but for now I think that will hold and this looks alright. But the other issue is that by having a rock in there, this one here keep leaning this way, so I have to counter measure that by finding another rocks to rest against that to hold in place. And then again, what that does is that is leaning toward this rock, and then this rock have a tendency to lean forward. So therefore I just temporarily hold it with a piece of styrofoam to avoid everything from collapsing. So this is something that you must deal with when you're working with rocks. The other issue that we may face, that I can really see right now, is that we're not achieving the height that we want. So what I mean is, if you look at the tank, it's still got a lot to go. I like to fill my tank up almost all the way, but at the moment this rock seems to not doing its job. It's just probably 1/4 or 1/3 of the way. So we may have to add in extra rocks up here to make it higher. But in saying that, we got a lot of backfill to work with. So let's see what we can do. All right, so look like I resolved that issue. I filled up the back put a rock in the middle to give it some height, put more substrate in there. What that does is hold and fill all the gaps between these rocks, and it stabilize it. That's why I said earlier I like to have a bit of substrate while I deal with rocks, especially to hold down the foundation like this. Look like we have a little bit of problem here with a gap, but not big of a deal. Substrate is not falling forward, so we'll deal with that later. I'll just leave that in there for now, just in case. Bit of a mess at the front, which we can deal with by one of these. You can just brush it backward and we can remove some later if required. So so far I've got the two side going, a little valleyway coming up, a bit of back to work with. Still not achieving the height that I like, but we'll deal with that a bit later. Okay, look like it's time to smash some rocks. We might need it now to fill up all the gaps. So what I do, I go through all my rocks, choose the one that doesn't look as nice as others, and then with your trusty hammer, give it a good smash. So like I said, these are easier to work with because they're almost like clay. So I'll start with smashing the edge, like so they can break apart. So there we have it. So maybe something like these, sharp edges is fine, so that can go between the glass or between the rocks. These one here can be used for decoration a bit later, but yeah, that's how I smash my rocks. And then I can separate these into smaller containers, so they're always on hand. Alright, so with all your smashed rocks, I'm gonna start filling up these gaps. So just put some in there, and again we're gonna fill up with substrate, but right now I like to fill up my gaps so that I no longer see these gaps here. So take a bit of time, but yes, start covering those gaps and then we can start the next step. Alright, so as you can see, after filling in those gaps, everything is looking good so far, but I do have a bit of a problem of this area here that I need to fill up, so that we can have something to cover here to make a little alleyway. So it is a bit empty here. So let's try something like this to put in there. Let's see what that look like. So yes, it does cover that area quite well, so that we got a little coverage there. So I'll continue with that and then find another piece to go at the back here. It's a bit empty, and deal with that bit there as well. But so far with that piece in there, as you can see, we have a little alleyway hidden behind here, so that's great. Okay, so after putting that piece there, it does create a bit of an alleyway, but to better that, I'll have to cover this area, which I put this other piece of rocks in there, just sticking out a little bit to give it more depth. So as you can see, it's working well. I also put in a piece of rock there to hold this rock as well, but I'm still having a massive gap in that area there. So what I think I'll do is I'll fill it with more substrate. So after filling with substrate, I'm just gonna even that out a little, or wherever it's needed. I think it's coming along nicely, so maybe more smashed rocks there. Now things start to shape up with that piece there and that little piece at the back just to hold up the back foundations, and it does create a little bit of a valley going, so I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to leave that for now. I'm just going to continue to fill up these gaps. Do take practice. I'm still not perfecting it, but see how we go. So this is the time where you use your handy tweezer. Just put in any smaller rocks that you can find, fill up the gap. Do note that I still haven't used any super glue in my scape so far. The reason for that is while we do the foundation, things may shift around. So for example, this piece here used to be over here connecting to this rocks here, but after having all the weight and then touching it and so on with the substrate, it's got shifted in front here. Not fussed about that. I'm quite like that. It's quite natural. So now it's got a little bit more depth going here. So turned out great, even though it shifted a bit. But this is the reason why I don't use super glue during the foundation, because it can get messy with the super glue if things don't go to plan. So for now, looking great. Okay, so now that I'm quite happy with the layout so far, I can go ahead and apply some super glue to the edges. Just a little bit, don't need a lot. Just enough to maybe just hold all and bond all the smaller rocks together, and that should be enough. Okay, so far everything's looking great. I went ahead and find a piece of rocks to squeeze it in there, smash the edges if I have to, just to get it to fit. So I'm quite satisfied with that. Look like there's a lot of work to be done in this frontal area. So I'm gonna try to find a piece here and maybe some pieces just to build it up, because at the moment it's a bit empty. And I want it to be multi-layered, so one layer here, two layer, three, and maybe even a fourth. So therefore we need to work on this frontal area right now. Okay, so I place a big rock here, that's a single piece, and two small rocks joining together just to cover that area. Don't worry, one at the back, we're going to fill it up with substrate or more rocks. But this little gap here is still a bit too open. I want it to be multi-stack. So I found this piece that can go in there. Let's have a look. Yeah, that looks really good. But I don't quite like this little top here, so I'm gonna try to hammer that out and see if we can remove this bit, because it's blocking the view, and I want it to be a bit more smoother. So let's try to smash that out. Alright, so after hammering out that edges, things are coming up nicely, but yes, again, we have a lot of gap between here and here, and a bit of a joint at the front as well. So we'll deal with that, but at the moment let's add in more substrate to see if we can get the valley going. So you can see by just adding a bit more substrate, it filled up the gaps nicely, and the alleys start to come along. You can start seeing it. Got a bit of gaps and everything here and there to deal with, but I will fill that up with smaller rocks. But overall, looking good. So you can see, just take a bit of patience with a little tweezer. I'm just filling in all these gaps. Again, practice make perfect. So just keep doing what you do, and then just trying to fill up these gaps. with a smaller piece, and then we'll go through the final details a bit later. But for now, I just want to fill it up so then I see what they look like before we start maybe go into the next step. Again, now is a good time to add in that extra glue, because so far I'm quite happy with this, so I don't mind gluing it down a little. So add a bit glue everywhere, and then we go through and stack more rocks. So the next step will be building up the back. It's going to be an alley, so we're going to have high mountain going to the back. I leave 2 brushes there so you can see where the mountain are forming, and then we'll create a viewpoint somewhere along the middle or so. I'm just going to find the rocks now and then trying to stack it up and see how it looks. Okay, so I found 4 pieces of rocks. One here, one there, and one there, and another one here. So they're just on lay like a domino, so just one at the back of the other. But so far trying to get it in a triangular sort of shape, so give it more depth. You can already see that there's a really good viewpoint going toward the back already, so we're trying to emphasize on that. So I'll probably fill up the substrate a bit more, and then we go from there. So I added more rocks at the back, but what I've done different this time is I remove all the substrate here and here, so that give a better depth to the alley. Other than that, I restructured the foundation of these rocks. I added more rocks at the back. They're just simple triangular piece just to connect everything together. It will hold. Nothing's falling apart. It's quite stable. 2 structural piece here just to hold these 2 rocks, and then I added these 2 pieces here just to give it a bit more depth. Other than that, look like our viewpoint have shifted and it's probably going this way now. My initial plan was over here, but you know, it happens sometime when you plan, and then when you actually escape, thing shifted and so on. For example, like that one there shifted over here now, so we just have to deal with it. But other than that, it looks alright, I reckon, so we keep going. And here's our viewpoint. I've closed it off with 3 pieces of triangular rocks that I inserted down there. Inserted a large piece here as well just to cover that hold. So far everything is forming well. Our path's gonna traveling down here. This is a good time to use your brush to clean up any substrate that remain on the rocks. Other than that, so far this is the foundation that we're after. Now we'll be adding the details. So this is where we go through the final details. What I've done so far is I give the path a little bit of a super glue, especially around the edges of the rocks, just to hold it more steadily, so that when I added the sand, nothing falling apart. So let's add the sand now and see what they look like. It's time to use these handy tools to trace around the path. Once trace that around, we can then finalize and touch up any bit of sand that may come loose, and then we add in the rocks detail a bit further down. So the sand is being added. Don't stress too much if it's go all over the place and you can't see the path just yet, because we're going to finalize that with extra details of rocks and placement of substrate and so on. So eventually the path going to be cleared out and then you can see it better. Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of details added, small rocks and everything around the path, around the cracks. There's still a bit of work to be done at the front, so what I've done is I've collect all the small rocks in a little container, and I will just simply spread them across. So I just sprinkle it like this, like so, and a little bit over here, and then I'll use my little tweezer just to do the final adjustment, and I will be doing that all around the front. And there we have it, a complete scape. The last thing to do is go through all the detail, all the crack with your super glue, like so. Make sure everything sticks. And we're good to go. If you like what you see, remember to like and subscribe my channel. There'll be more work coming. Once again, thank you for joining me in this episode to complete this 30 centimeter cube. I think it looked great. Everything going according to plan. We may be able to do better, but for now, I'm very satisfied with the result. Hope you like it. Bye.